Hey everyone, welcome to Life Unpotted. This is Daisy here. We have you for the next hour. So excited to have you join.
I just want to let everyone know we just did like 4 takes of this intro because sometimes you have to get into the flow.
We're a little rusty.
But that
doesn't mean the conversation won't be great, because it will be.
It will
Stay
be.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to I think with podcasting especially, it's like you kind of need to you have to relax with anything and get comfortable being yourself.
With our podcast here specifically, we are very vulnerable with the conversations we have, whether they're about us or they're just about topics that you have to be vulnerable for. So don't be fooled. It takes us sometimes, not all days are equal, but sometimes it takes us a lot of takes to get vulnerable and to get open so we can be in the right mindset and the right energy space for this conversation.
Because I don't want to be fake on here. You know what I mean? But I think
you can't lie to the mic.
Yeah.
You can't.
You can't lie to the mic.
And that's something that we hold ourselves accountable for. Whenever we come on this podcast, we will never be someone that we are not. We will always show up as we are. We may take 15 takes before we get going properly, but it gets us into the right headspace because we're always going to show up in this headspace because that's what this podcast is about.
Yeah. No, I think... Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly. I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff going on right now in life, and that's why I just got a little nervous right now. It's just like, where to start? Where to start? How about I start?
Yeah, how about you start, Sophie?
So honestly, I honestly felt a little nervous to be honest about this on the podcast, but I was like, you know what? It's probably really relatable to a lot of people. But long story short, I got laid off from my job last week, and it was honestly an insanely weird experience because I was planning to leave my job at the end of August because like we've told you guys, we're moving, and I've been saving up money ready to make the plunge, and then life made the decision for me, and basically it happened like last week, and it was like this really, really weird thing of I was obviously really surprised because I didn't know what was happening. But when I was explained why, it made complete sense. I really have been kind of checked out the past few months, honestly. So if you guys don't know already, I've worked at a law firm for the past 5 years. I'm a lawyer. I've been doing commercial real estate, and it's a very, very, very corporate world. You're in a very intense environment, and it's been a process of me figuring out that that's not what I want to do. So naturally, I kind of did check out, and people realize that because in reality, people can kind of tell when you're not in it, especially at this kind of job. You have to be working at the law firm. Like, you have to be in it for the long run. They know if you don't want to be partner, they're kind of not going to want to waste their time with you. And that's fine. There's no resentment there. But basically what happened is that I got laid off, and I was really like, oh my God, this is happening. And I was hit with a huge, huge, huge wall of uncertainty. What am I going to do next? I thought I was going to, quit in August. Now what? And that's kind of prompted this whole podcast episode to kind of talk about uncertainty, to talk about, number one, how uncomfortable it can be when you're faced with uncertainty, but also all of the growth that comes from relaxing into uncertainty. And I feel like life was making a decision for me because I'm ready. I'm ready to move on. I did not want to be there anymore. And as ready as I thought I was to make the decision in 3 months, clearly there was something that was still holding me back. Clearly I was still waiting. And it just shows that things don't go as planned. Things don't always go as planned. So I don't know if I was rambling. I don't know. It's going to take me a little bit to get into talking about this, I feel like.
So I'll add a little bit there. So I've said this on the last 3 podcast episodes. So if you haven't listened to those, I'll say I left my job. I said, hey, here's my 2 weeks. I left that day pretty much about a month ago. It was the end of March. So with the way that it worked out, it honestly makes sense that both Sophie and I are not at our jobs. We're able to focus on Life Unpotted. The way that things happen sometimes, I think plans are meant to be broken. And what I took away from this is if you have a plan for a long period of time, like Sophie had a plan to leave her job for a while. And I think when there's so much space between when the plan is made and when the plan is to be executed, it's just a signpost to keep you in one direction. Like it's likely to change, I think. If you are in the mindset of, I'm trying to make changes in my life, right? So that was what I took away from this, because I was like, it actually feels better. I mean, it was just a big of a shock for me when Sophie was laid off because it made sense. It was like, wait, this is shocking. Of course, it always is shocking, but it felt right. It felt like something was telling us this is what should be happening right now. And with the path that we are on, those are the kinds of things to watch out for because no one knows where they're going. None of us know where we're going. And I think once you get attuned with that and comfortable with that, you're like, all right, okay, things are going to be redirected. And I think that's an exciting place to live. And I think that's kind of what we're honing in on is taking each day at a time, showing up each day as we can to work towards this direction that we don't know what it looks like yet. We just know what we have right now is not what we want our lives to look like. So we're working on building something we literally don't know what it looks like. And I think that is something that is really weird and it can feel confusing at times, but it's also what fuels a fire. And I think it can be misunderstood. So I think it's important to talk about for that specific reason, because if you are saying, hey, what my life is right now, even though it looks quote unquote great, it's successful, whatever it is, if it's not fueling your fire, like we always talk about this, we're all going to die. Like literally, I think I've been processing like my mortality even more. So you have to listen to that fire within you. If you don't even know what the next step is, if you just know this isn't working, take that leap. Take that leap because I'm not anywhere right now, but mentally I'm worlds away from when I left my job because I opened it up. There's a mind prison that I was keeping myself within that I was only able to think within certain constraints. And letting go of things that weren't serving me anymore allowed me to open up those constraints. And what I boil that down to is trusting myself. And I think the more we learn this muscle to trust ourselves, the further in the right direction we're going to get. And I'll clarify for me, because I was talking about this with someone the other day. The first time I decided to trust myself was when I realized that I would start dating women. I'd always dated men. And that was the very first time that I tapped into this random part of me that was like, maybe you should do this. And it was the first time I'd ever realized that. And I took that step. And that was about 3 years ago. And ever since that moment, it felt like a pivotal moment for me to trusting myself. And I think that can look a million different ways. But I think once you choose to start going down that journey of listening to yourself, whatever that means, that's when life begins.
I think one of the craziest moments for me after this is happening, it's been a whirlwind of the past few days, honestly, to the point where when I was in the office that day before I got laid off, I had this huge amount of anxiety of feeling like I might be getting laid off. Like it's something I can't even explain. Like clearly my body was connected to this. Clearly I had known this was a possibility. And what I was really thinking about was just like, my intuition, I have always known this is not the path I want to go. I have always known deep down that I do not want to be a lawyer in a corporate setting. I do not want to be a lawyer, if maybe at all. And from the first day I started that job 5 years ago, I didn't want to do it. And I thought, okay, maybe this is what it means to work. Maybe just like any job you work at is going to suck. And let me put my head down and let me really focus. And I was in my early 20s. So I was like, okay, what else am I going to be really doing right now? And the analogy I really want to draw, and I was explaining to you this, Daisy, like a few days ago, was just kind of like, we always think about the sun setting and the sun rising, right? The earth is rotating, so we perceive the sun to be rising and setting. When in reality, the sun is always completely shining, completely, right? It's just a matter of where on the earth axis the earth is and how it is relative to the sun. And I was equating this to kind of how I felt about my intuition. 5 years ago, I had the same thoughts that I didn't really want to be a lawyer, that I really didn't want to live this certain kind of life, but the intuition was a lot smaller to me. It felt kind of like the way I see the sun when the sun's going up and down from a very limited perspective. I can't see the full sun. I can't see the full intuition. Everyone's opinion and what everyone thinks and everybody wants for you is like the clouds that get in the way of you from seeing the sun completely, right? Or the sky. And I think throughout the past few years, what's happened is those clouds have kind of started to go away, and my intuition has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like the kind of moment where, let's say you go on a spaceship and you leave Earth and you're like, wow, the sun has looked like this the whole time, but I could never see it. The sun has always been so big, it's always been so large, but I could never see it because my perspective was influenced by other stuff. In this moment, it became so clear to me that my intuition has known all along, that I have known all along that I don't want to live this life. But it's taken me so many years of questioning and going through the ringer, going through the ups and downs, going through the pain, going through the uncertainty to really figure out and now get to the point of life actually making that decision for me, even when if I knew I was going to make the decision, but clearly I still wasn't that connected with it yet, to the point that I am now to recognize when the rug's kind of been pulled off for me that, oh, wow, I never wanted to be there.
Why do you think it took so long to realize that? This is a loaded question.
Did that make sense, everything I just said?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of comfort there. Because I'm working at a quote unquote prestige job that validates you, that the world validates you for going down this certain path, that I didn't even, it's like, I feel like it's kind of almost like hard to talk about because it's like, I'm trying to, I still am processing this.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing I really realized is that it was like 3 days after I kind of left my job where I was like, oh, wow, for the first time in my life, I don't have anything to attach my identity to. I'm no longer a lawyer at this job. I'm no longer clinging to all these external things, all this like materialistic world I used to live. I am now faced to look to nowhere else but within. And I don't know. I think it's just like, it's honestly really complicated. And maybe I can help myself process it throughout this conversation because I don't know. It's confusing. Why did I stay there? Why was I living a life I didn't want to be in? I guess it's like, why do any of us do that? And I think it's because we don't know there's another route. I've had little ounces of thoughts throughout my career of, oh, maybe I want to do something more in the mindfulness space. I was like, well, nope. That's not prestigious. How am I going to do that? How am I going to make money? Doubts and fears came over. And I just think that throughout time of starting this podcast and kind of going down this path that the window's able to open up and go, okay, I can live that life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
I was thinking in my head why maybe it took so long to realize. As you were processing. And I think about it. You said right now I'm no longer clinging to outside things to give me value, to give me worth, where it feels like our entire life from when we start school to when we go to college, we're told your value comes from your grades. Your value comes from your extracurricular activities. Your value comes from how good of a college you get into. And then you get to college and I wasn't thinking about passions. I was thinking about maybe my first year of college, second year of college, you're kind of like exploring this new life. You're on your own. Like there's freedom. That's really exciting. But then it's like junior year comes in. This is just from my experience, is that you have to pick a path. Are you getting an internship? Right. You're very much quickly shuttled into how am I going to make money? How am I going to support myself? And what career am I going to be able to make the most money? So for the most of your life, you're put down this path of like, how can I make money? How can I, or not even that, how can I achieve? And then it goes into how can I make money? What career path can support me in that way? So you weren't ever connecting with yourself the way that you allowed yourself to the past few years. So I don't know what led you to that. Maybe it was a level of unhappiness, of a deep down level of it that I think a lot of us feel when we're in things that aren't aligned. And I will also, this is an interesting antidote. I'm reading this book called Turn Pro. I forget the name of the author, but he has this theory that the reason we're suffering is not because we're mentally ill, not because something is innately wrong with us, but but because we are not living in alignment with our passions, because our passions is what keeps us thriving. We don't want to retire from our passions ever. Like his was writing, and he didn't find it till he was like in his mid 30s or 40s. And he's 80 years old cranking out writing. And he was like, it's the act of what I'm doing. It's not getting caught up in the failures or successes. And I truly just enjoy doing it because it's pushing me. So I think that's the difference between the mindset we had coming out of college, is that kind of just realized, what am I doing? Is how I think you felt.
I feel like I've come to the recognition that I have spent much of my life living on autopilot. And I think that is a recognition that you can only have with perspective. I think so many of us live our life on autopilot, which means that we're just going down a path because we are on that path. We are walking on the road. We've been on that road for 5 years. So why would we turn around, right? When you're on one path, you don't know there's other paths. When I've been at this law firm for the past 5 years as a lawyer, I have put so much time and effort to becoming a lawyer, getting a degree. Like, it was like there's no other way for me to go. There was like no other route that I could possibly take, because this has been the path that I had to go on. But it's almost like there was no reason that I was on the path.
Right. Can you pin back to why you were on this path?
No.
You can't?
So maybe this is like I'm having a processing moment right now where it's almost like, it's like there was almost no reason I was on this path. I was just on it because I thought I had to be. There was no connected feeling to it. I didn't feel like, I did think, I want to be partner. I want to go down this route. I want to have a prestigious life, make all this money. I was connected to that outcome.
You were connected to the outcome.
I was connected to the outcome, but I was not connected to the act of doing. I did not like drafting loan agreements. I did not like doing all this.
Does anyone?
Well, that is a whole nother question. Does anybody? Maybe. And, we talked to Cam about your Dharma, and your Dharma, I think it's a whole nother complicated conversation, but it's just like, I was living on a path basically because I thought that was the only way to go. I thought that was the only thing I could do. I remember so dauntingly being in college, being like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life?
There is so much pressure put on you to figure it out and to have it achieved and to be going into something that is promising, which I fell into that. I was like, I was freaking out. I got an internship at an advertising agency in New York, and I jumped right into it. And it's like, I was so stressed. I thought it was like the end all be all. This one decision was going to change my life.
It's just like everything you're making.
But it was detached.
Because you're making these decisions out of anxiety. I was making all these decisions out of fear and out of anxiety.
You're making your decisions out of fear.
And I think for the first time in my life, the fear has gone away, and I'm able to make decisions not just out of fear and not just out of anxiety, but out of a thought of, hey, I have a one life. What do I actually want to do? What am I curious about? What am I interested in? And I am like mind blown that we can spend our lives doing things that we don't want to do.
Oh yeah.
And
because it's out of fear.
And I think like a lot of the catalyst for me was I started to be like, this cannot be the way my life has to be. I remember like 2 years ago just being like, there is no way that this is it. Like there is no way that this is how I have to live my life. And I think from there, that kind of ounce of honestly unhappiness spearheaded and kind of lights a fire under you to start thinking about, okay, if I know where I'm at in life right now is not where I want to be, sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that is all you need to know. And for me, it was like, I know I don't want to spend my life being a commercial real estate lawyer. I know I do not want to do that. So do I know exactly what I want to do? No, but I know it's not that. And I think sometimes what we have to recognize in order to get an answer, in order to figure out what we want to do in life, we don't need to know exactly what we want to do, but we just need to know what we don't want.
Yeah, 100%.
And I feel the fuel in me building, like the passion's coming out, because I'm just like, I haven't really been thinking about this the past few days, and I have kind of honestly maybe been suppressing it, maybe trying to let it just be, but the recognition is that like I have no freaking idea what my life's gonna be the next week, even the next few years, the next few months. But I would so much rather sit in this uncertainty of not knowing what my life is gonna look like than spend my life doing something that I don't want to do. And at one point, this sounded like an illusion. At one point, this sounded like a dream. Oh, only certain kind of people can do that. Only certain people who have certain opportunities can go and take that leap. But I started putting the work in. I started putting work in after work. We started working on this podcast. We started making connection. And I don't know. I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation of figuring it out. Really, I'm going to keep getting more clarity as I go.
Oh, yeah.
But just from this point right now is the recognition that, like, it is so easy to be stuck in a life that you don't actually want to be in. And it's not until you leave that you're able to be provided that full level of hindsight, that full level of perspective to go, wow, how did I even get here?
I think you just hit on a really important point of when you're in a job or you're in a path of life that you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but you have an illusion of comfort, an illusion of what direction you're going in because you have an obligation of what you're doing, an obligation to what you're doing. So that is why you get up every day. But I don't think it's that much different in terms of being fearful of not knowing what you're doing with the job you're in or the direction you're going in, and not knowing what you're doing when you pull that job away and where you pull those obligations away and you move on. Now, the outcomes of the fruits of that labor that are created are very different. Because if you're super uncertain about what you're doing and you don't know why you're doing it, but you continue to do it because you're getting a safe paycheck, or you continue doing it because it's the safe choice in your life because you don't want to, not have a retirement, or you don't want to not be able to give to your 401k, that's one thing, right? But it's very different when you don't, it is different, but it's also not different when you are in a place where you pull all of that illusion of comfort away and you start focusing on, what do I really want? And it's that there's that level of discomfort there. Both of them are not good feelings, but one breeds a positive outcome of making you figure it out, right? Was that clear?
I don't know if this is what you meant, but I think this is what you meant, and it's a really good point of what I envisioned in my head. It's like this uncertainty kind of exists in both scenarios. Like you're at the job, you're working in a job that you don't really want to be in, and you're uncertain about your life, or you leave the job and you're uncertain about your life, But when you're in the job, there is this level of comfort. Of course, there is the paycheck. There is all these things that is kind of being like, okay, let me kind of mask your true feelings. Let me give you a distraction of not having to really face what you really want in life. And it was a few days ago when I really had this recognition, not being at my job anymore, where for the first time in my adult life, I sat there in my room without any distractions, and I truly, truly felt like I asked myself, who am I? Because I'm not a lawyer anymore, so I'm not that, right? I have clung to this identity as a lawyer for so many years to give me a sense of purpose, to give me a sense of identity, to give me a sense of this is what I'm doing in my life. I am a lawyer. And now I have pulled that away. So that has been who I am.
Well, what your reality has always been is now gone. And that can be really uncomfortable and really bizarre to realize, I don't have any sense of reality right now because there's nothing reflecting back to me where I'm at.
Yeah.
And it's disillusioning, but that's necessary. That is necessary.
It's necessary.
It's super uncomfortable.
Because now what's happening is that, and then so much fear and so much anxiety was there in this moment, but because I have really, really been really learning about how to handle my emotions, it's like I sat there in this moment on my bed feeling so scared. And I literally feel like I picked up my toolbox from the past year and I said, okay, just let this sit. Just let these emotions sit. You're scared, you're nervous, you don't know what's going to happen, you no longer have a clear direction in your life. Let that sit. And I did. And then guess what? About an hour later, I could breathe again. And it's like, on the topic of uncertainty, on the topic of learning how to handle uncertainty, when we're able to, when we don't push away the feelings that come up with making these big changes, and we let them sit and we let them process, there is so much growth and realizations to be had in the other end. And while I am so scared not knowing my clear direction in my life, because I am realizing that that is okay, because I am realizing that on the other end of that will be clarity, that the only way to ever really get clarity is to let the emotions just go, because that is where we get perspective. That is my motivation right now. Because I know it wasn't that. I know it was not to be that lawyer in that world, in that law firm. So if it's not that, I'm going to sit through whatever I need to sit through. Then no matter how much discomfort it is, no matter how much I have to keep looking at myself, because I know that as long as I'm following my intuition, as long as I'm following my gut, and as long as I'm staying curious, I'm going to get to the place that feels aligned to me.
So really, really good point. We talk about this a lot, is we have the internal purpose of our lives and we have the external purpose, meaning no matter where you are in your life, there's always going to be value within yourself that is totally separate from anything that you are doing. Now, what led you to getting to this job, you aren't aware of. You weren't in touch with your internal environment or your internal purpose at all, right? But the last few years, you've gotten in touch with your internal purpose. And you've gotten so in touch with it that you realize you can no longer handle this external environment you have because it's not your external purpose. And now that you're taking time to get in touch with your internal purpose right now, even more deeply involved in that, that is naturally going to lead you to a more aligned external purpose. So when people say, when you follow your heart, trust, have faith, universe will bring you something, I think that's a good example of why that is true. Because as long as you are focusing on your internal purpose and feeding that, you're going to create a path to your external purpose. It's going to be aligned with your internal purpose because you're focusing on what is going back to the dharmas, my nature, whatever you want to call it. What is my innate reason for being here? What is something that I love doing? How can I do that? And you have all of these preconceived notions of why you can't do that. I think being at a job further tells you why you can't do it. Because you're like, oh, this is my reality. How am I going to change this? Well, one way to do that is to leave your job. Of course, there's other ways. But I think when you get to a certain point, when you do that, it spins your reality on its head. And it further pushes you into your internal purpose, which further pushes you into the path of finding what in this world you can do that can light you on fire.
I think what was starting to happen to me the past few months as I was kind of starting to disconnect from my job, disconnect from really, really, really striving to be somebody I was not, is I went to the office one day recently, and it was actually 2 days before I got laid off, where I actually started to feel like myself again at my job. I started to feel like I am the same. That was the same person I feel like when I'm with my friends or with my family, which is a big deal in a corporate office. And it became so clear to me in that moment that I have been jeopardizing who I am for the past 5 years in order to try to excel in a career. I have been having to change myself, and it may feel. And I think this is a really important recognition that, like, even when you're working somewhere that isn't quote unquote toxic, they treat you right and you have vacation and all these things, we set our baseline so low that we think that just because all those things are okay, that just because we're not at a toxic environment, that, oh, then things must be good. But what I realized is that no, I was still expected to change myself. And that may be like the biggest realization that I'm taking right in this very moment, is that I refuse to work somewhere in the future or to do anything in the future that requires me to change myself. And How do I know what that felt like? It's because I started to really connect to myself and let go of all these layers of external expectations of my value comes from what my boss thinks, my value comes from this, from salary is like my value comes from within. And because of that, I'm no longer going to try to prove myself to anybody else. I do not need anybody else's validation to tell me who I am. It does not mean I'm not going to work hard. It does not mean I want to strive for things. But it means that I don't need to go to a job and then change who I am completely just to feel better about myself, when in reality, all that is taking me farther and farther away from who I really am.
Wow.
Yeah.
Expected to change yourself. Once you realize your value is infinite and it's within you, it can no longer be exploited. When you are someone who thinks all of your value comes from outside of you, as an employer, it's easier to have these workers ingrained into this environment of, let me take that off your desk. Let me do that. Let me take that for you. Maybe there's different perspectives on this, different motives that people have, but I see this as a big one. I mean, because when I started working, that was my entire motivation. That was my entire fuel, was how can I get validated? How can I do that? And I think when you're young, it's easy to do that. But what you just said is profound. You are expected to change yourself.
Yeah.
Expected to change yourself.
And when you don't know who you are, then you think that is actually who you are. You think that this person you've become at this job in this life is who you are because you have not seen yourself otherwise. So now that I have gained hindsight and perspective, and now that I'm actually connected to myself, my base state that I have accepted, that threshold of this is good enough for me, this job is good enough for me because I don't know anything else. But as soon as I start realizing, oh, wait, there's this infinite amount of possibilities to live, there are so many other ways to live, that no longer becomes acceptable anymore. And that's when change happened.
When you said this is no longer acceptable, that's where the change happens, where you say, I can no longer do this anymore. Even if from an external view, if you're looking on the outside in, everything is perfect, everything is together. You're like, F this. I'm not doing this anymore. This is not what I want. And that's that inner voice or that inner light, whatever it is, of what is your dharma or what is your purpose here. Changing who you are is not worth, no matter how much money you're making, no matter how much prestige, how much status, class, that is not going to change what lights you up. And I really, truly believe that finding your inner value is what leads you to finding your purpose of what you can enjoy doing, and it not being out of fear. You haven't been operating out of fear for a long time.
I have operated the past 5 years out of fear.
But not the last year.
Right.
Which was the leading up point to this.
I started to let go. I finally started to let go. And that's where the freedom starts to come.
And it's so funny because the last 5 years of being in law, like you evolved to be a really great lawyer. You evolved to be someone you could rely on. And then you started to evolve beyond that to within yourself, that it worked not in your favor because you realized the people that you were working for realized like, she doesn't want to be here. This is not what she is meant to do. And everyone saw that.
Two things. As I'm going to, like, to the listeners, I'm going to go a lot deeper in this in later episodes. It's still really new. There's a lot to dissect here on this. But I think I want to make something really clear is that I knew I wanted to leave my job a few years ago, right? I knew I wanted to do that, but I had to do a lot of inner work before I got to the point where I was really ready. Yes, I ended up getting laid off, but I was going to leave in 2 months anyway, right? So the point I want to make here is that if you're at a job that you don't like, if you know that you don't want to, if you're at a job that you don't like and you know that you don't want to be there, use it as an opportunity to learn about yourself. Because for me, being somewhere I didn't want to be in for so many years, I said to myself 1 year ago, okay, you know what? Even when I leave this job, there are still so many things I'm going to have to figure out about myself. So let me try to use this as a platform. Let me try to question all these things about my reactivity to getting anxious and not being able to handle things. And if I had left my job 1 year ago from today, I would not be at the place I am now. I wouldn't be as confident leading into this discomfort. So I want to make that really clear, because I don't think the point is to tell everyone to get up and go and to get up and quit that job you're at. You have to be responsible about it. You have to think it through. But start thinking while you're in the place that you are right now. Start getting ready. Start building up that emotional toolbox so that when the time comes and you are in a place where you are ready to leave and you are ready to pivot, that you have the emotional tools ready to sit in the discomfort when it comes, to be able to embrace the uncertainty when it's there. Because ripping off the Band-Aid and leaving that job is not the answer. It is not the answer. It is not going to make you any happier. What will, though, is learning about yourself, learning and going on a very, very, very deep reflection journey. And you can do that while you're at your job. You do not have to leave your job to do that. So I just want to make this point really, really clear that, yes, I just left my job and I'm on this journey. But don't feel pressure that you also have to do this right now. Because we're all on different paths and we're all on different journeys. And the past year, what I've been doing is using this job as an opportunity to just build my emotional toolbox. And if I didn't do that, I don't think I'd be able to handle this right now in the way that I am.
Remarkable point. Because everyone's path is different, and not ripping off that Band-Aid's really, really important. And I think also not rushing the process of not seeing Sophie and being like, I want to be there. I want to be at that place. Because there were years of, I don't know, call it suffering, but years of like difficulty that led up to this moment. Like, that's why you should cherish those moments that feel confusing and difficult, because those are the moments where these moments are made. And you can't wish anything away, because those are the most impactful times on us, because it's what shows us and what helps reveal to us what we're capable of. And sometimes you have to be in that, I don't want to call it darkness, but whatever you want to call it, you have to be in it for years. And of course, having awareness of that you can come out of that makes it a lot easier. But there was years where I was in it and the confusion and all, and I thought that was how my life was going to be. I was so in it. And what I think is interesting is when you start to gain just more awareness of yourself and your place in this world, you get less caught up in your head, so you can further understand your mortality. So you can further understand the urgency you have to enjoy yourself versus getting stuck in your brain, and before you know it, it's time to die.
Well,
that was
on that note.
But I mean, when I talk about like mortality of understanding, it's like, well, how do you truly want to spend your time here? I feel like growing that awareness. And I think in order to get to that awareness, like, you have to have that unawareness too. Like, you have to be in the shit of it all or else you don't have appreciation for it.
If I didn't go through the process of being at a job I didn't want to be in for the past 5 years, I would not now have the hindsight and the perspective to have learned so much about myself. Sometimes we need to go through uncomfortable situations that we don't want to be in. Sometimes we have to be at jobs or be in situations that we don't want to be in, because us going through that will give us the lens to learn about ourselves. If we start at 20 years old and we live and our life is absolutely perfect and we quote unquote know what our purpose is and all these things, you're not going to have that same, I mean, I don't know, but you probably won't have that same level of, you might not have that same level of perspective, because a lot of times in my experience, it is the difficult situations that teach us who we are. It is the uncomfortable situations that teach us about how we actually are as a person. So if we always want things to be perfect, if we always expect that things have to go our way and that life has to be an easy path and that we have to know exactly what we want at age 21 and that we have to know by 23 we have to be doing what we want, you won't have those years to kind of guide you to look back on and say, oh, wow, I learned so much about myself during that. And that's what this really was about.
Life's a dance. I appreciate every moment.
There's so much to delve in on this topic. I mean, I just think that this podcast is going to continue to evolve because we are evolving so much. If people have specific questions about like how to handle getting laid off, like how to handle the uncertainty, we're going to probably go into other episodes, but write us in because when we're unpacking these topics, there are so many different angles to go at it, and there's so many different perspectives to go at it. So we want to be able to help you also if you have specific questions too. So yeah, I think just to kind of recap, guys, it's just like we're going through a lot of uncertainty right now. We are going through so much uncertainty right now, and it is freaking uncomfortable. It is so scary, but even I have learned so much about myself in the past 3 days, and we're only gonna keep learning. So stick around for the journey because we want you guys to hear so that hopefully it can help you, and then you can keep learning about yourself too. Because it is through reflection that we are able to connect with ourselves and through relatable conversations. Because at the end of the day, my experience is not really that unique to me. It really just represents the overall human experience, overall human journey of connecting with ourselves and figuring out what that means. So on that note,
thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here, guys.
And don't forget to leave a review, leave a rating below,
please.
Whatever you like. Whatever you don't like, let us know because we're here for the listeners.
And join the conversation. DM us. Get involved because that is the point of this. And we're going to keep growing this and keep building it and keep sharing our experiences and for as long as we have and long as we can. So thank you everyone so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We really couldn't do it without you guys' support. So we'll talk to you next week. And until then, keep on thinking and keep on questioning.